Marketing Land, and MarTech today. And this is GMB Next, the evolution of local search. And I'm really excited to be presenting on this topic and speaking to you today for the next roughly 25 minutes about Google Maps, GMB, and where local search is going. So when you think of the phrase local business, when you hear that phrase, what do you think of? You probably think of a mom and pop store, a small retailer, Main Street. You don't think of large brands, right? What about these businesses? Is Trader Joe's a local business? Macy's, Crunch Fitness, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks? All of these large brands and franchises are in fact local businesses. That's because most of them do their business, their transactions in a physical place, and consumers physically visit those stores. So I would argue that all of those big brands are equally local businesses, just like the mom and pop stores that you typically think about when that phrase comes up. You probably heard something like this in your careers. Roughly 80% of US disposable income is spent within 10 to 20 miles of home, right? That's something that many of us have heard. However, it's not exactly right. I spent a number of years off and on trying to find the original source for this. And in 2012, I wrote a long blog post on my search for the origin of this kind of stat. And I was unable to find an original stat. What I found instead was a lot of citations to something like this that in turn cited to other unattributed sources. And so it turns out to be true, but it's not exactly true as formulated. It's intuitively correct, right? We live in the physical world. We travel short distances from our home or work in order to get things. And so it's kind of intuitively true and has been accepted, and it's kind of crystallized into this piece of conventional wisdom. A company called Access Development in 2017 did a piece of research that tried to verify that stat that I just talked to you about. What they found was something similar but slightly different. So what they discovered was that more than 90% of consumers make most of their purchases within 15 minutes of home or work. Larger consideration purchases, people are willing to travel a greater distance for. But it still remains to be true. It still remains that most people are spending most of their money close to home or close to their work. Now, enter e-commerce, right? So e-commerce has been around for 20 plus years, and it's grown from about $4.5 billion in 1999, which is on the left side of the chart, to last year, roughly $600 billion, massive growth. And that's even more true now in the last couple of months with the coronavirus. It's been growing by triple digits in certain categories. So this is a big, big story, but it's not as big a story as the one I'm about to tell you. So US GDP is about $21 trillion, and about 70% of that economic activity consists of consumer spending, consumer buying, right? That's why consumer confidence is so important, because if consumers feel confident, they have job security, they feel that the economy is heading in the right direction, then they're more inclined to spend money, which represents a problem for the economy right now. But nonetheless, about 14.7 trillion of that 21 trillion is consumer spending. About 90% of Americans are online. That's according to the Pew Research surveys. 90% of them use the internet to do local business lookups of one sort or another, right? And that can take various forms. It can be reviews, it can be contact information, phone numbers, addresses, can be directions. There's all kinds of things. Price information, menu information. There's all kinds of things that we're doing that online to find out information about businesses and places in our local area. In the same way that people used to use the yellow pages, the print yellow pages, which were in the kitchen, they'd pull them out, they'd look for a phone number, they'd call the business. Today we use the internet for that. So by my calculation, about $12 trillion of economic activity is being touched in one way or another by the internet, as I mentioned. So people doing basic lookups, people doing more involved research. There's almost nothing today that we don't do in terms of purchase consideration. When we're doing research before making a purchase, before finding somebody to repair a dishwasher or paint our house, or before planning a vacation, or now even before buying groceries in some cases, that we don't go to the internet and look for information or transact. And so about 57% of US GDP, by my calculation, is impacted in one way or another by the internet. This is a much, much, much bigger story than e-commerce. It's about 20 times the value of e-commerce spending in the United States. And it's not gotten a lot of attention because it's very hard to quantify. It's very hard to measure. It's essentially the problem of online to offline attribution. So, sometimes this is called ROPO, research online, purchase offline, or ROBO, research online, buy offline, or online to offline. Whatever you want to call it, it's a massive, massive phenomenon that has been going on since the very beginning and is even more pronounced today as the internet and the physical world have become more integrated, which I will be talking about throughout the rest of this presentation. So the coronavirus is the kind of X variable here in all of our lives, right? So everybody's gone into lockdown mode. Many states have opened up. Most states have opened up to varying degrees. But what we saw is triple-digit acceleration of e-commerce buying. People who never bought anything before online were buying things. People who are buying groceries. This morning I placed a grocery order with Whole Foods, right? I never had bought groceries online before. Now I'm doing it all the time. This is now a common thing. Traditional retail spending way off, online spending way up. And the question that is in many people's minds is how much will this behavior continue after stores completely reopen? The answer is much of it will continue, and it creates a much more complicated picture of consumer behavior for marketers and retailers. Now, two examples here illustrate what I think is the future of retail and online to offline behavior in general. Target and Best Buy. So in Q1, Target had like 140% growth year over year in e-commerce. And they also reported in their earnings call 5 million new Target.com shoppers. These are people who shopped at Target with varying degrees of regularity, who for the first time bought something from Target online. And of that 5 million new pool of new shoppers, 40% of them went to the store to pick something up, curbside pickup, buy online, pick up in store. With Best Buy, their Q1 year over year online growth was 250%, and 50% of those purchases were picked up in the store. So the store's fulfillment center, online purchase, offline fulfillment or pickup. And this is the model that will dominate going forward. So Google Maps. Google Maps sits right in the center of this. One way to look at Google Maps is as a browser or a user interface for the real world. There is no other application that exists that captures or is a kind of a metaphor or literal representation for this phenomenon as much as Google Maps. Google Street View, Google Earth. Google has literally mapped almost every inch of the globe and supplemented that with photos and rich data. It's a digital representation of the physical world. And what Google has done is insinuated itself as a kind of mediator between online research and offline purchasing or fulfillment. The bridge is kind of a metaphor between online and offline, and Google sits right in the center. It is right smack in the middle of this process. And so if you think about my calculation that about $12 trillion of 21 trillion in economic activity is online to offline, where the internet plays some role in purchase decision-making or facilitating transactions, Google is the only company, not Apple, not Facebook. Google is the only company that sits right in the center of it. And it's not going to capture trillions of dollars of advertising, but it certainly captures user loyalty and engagement that it monetizes in different ways. So Google Maps, or excuse me, Google My Business is the data provider for Google Search, the Assistant, and for Google Maps. It's the data entry point or the portal for local business information, including enterprises and franchises, that then gets distributed across this increasingly broad network. And Google Assistant represents a range of additional devices like Google Home, Android Auto, Android TV, and so on. So it's a broad spectrum of distribution, primarily Google Maps and Google Search. Just a little quick history. Google My Business really goes back all the way to the founding of Google Maps in 2005. It originally sort of showed up as the Google Local Business Center with the same intent to capture data and information and then distribute it. It was kind of Google's hedge against some of the third-party data that they were aggregating and ingesting that was incorrect or inconsistent. So they were seeking to get information directly from businesses as a kind of a source of truth. In 2009, Google introduced place pages. Those were the business profiles, essentially. 2010, Local Business Center evolved into Google Places, and Google introduced Hotpot, which was its effort to get reviews. So Google had unsuccessfully tried to buy Yelp for its reviews content. They bought the Zagat Guide instead, but that was an incomplete source of reviews. And so they created this thing, Hotpot, that was designed to get the community involved and generate more reviews. That eventually went away. In 2011, the ill-fated Google Plus. People probably don't even remember that in many cases, but Google Plus and Google Plus Local, which created enormous confusion for a time, launched. And finally, all of that, Google Plus died, and Google Plus Local was superseded by what we have today, which is just Maps and Search and business profile pages. And GMB, as it formally exists today, launched in 2014. So in the beginning, what everybody was fixated on was name, address, and phone number. Name, address, and phone number, NAP consistency. You were supposed to have all of that stuff consistent between all the citations out in the broader world, all the directories, and then on Google. And that was supposedly a ranking factor. And if there wasn't NAP consistency, then it was a problem. That has diminished in importance over time. There's still reasons to have your data distributed across different apps and different directories, especially in key verticals, but Google is focused much less on that and much more on its own data. And so the early days of pretty thin local business information has given way to something much, much deeper and more complex. So now Google is getting crowdsourced data from multiple places, chiefly local guides, but also other places. They still ingest third-party data, but they've got the sophistication and depth of what they're getting now is much greater. And so with local guides, you've got the program was instituted, I believe, in 2015. And at the time, it was 5 million. It grew to eventually 10 million, and then 20, et cetera, et cetera. In 2018, it was 95 million. And the most recent number that they published is 120 million local guides around the world. And these are people who are answering questions about businesses. They're on Q&A. They are the primary source of information on Q&A. So, if you're a business owner, you really need to pay attention because these local guides may have no clue about your business, but they are there nonetheless providing that information. And they are also taking pictures of businesses. And for each of these actions, they're rewarded. Google offers incentives and rewards at different levels. So they've gamified the whole process of collecting content from these 120 million plus people around the world. It's worked very, very well for them. A lot of local SEOs are kind of upset about the system because it creates incentives to spam and in some cases create fake content, fake reviews, which Google has a problem with because people are just trying to get the points or advance in levels or get the rewards. But nonetheless, this has been a relatively successful program, and especially when it comes to reviews. Google now has more reviews than anybody else by far, more than Facebook, more than Yelp, more than TripAdvisor, and it is largely because of this local guides program. Shifting back to Google Maps. Google Maps has evolved from a kind of two-dimensional local content source portal where you get basic information, as I was discussing, name, address, and phone number, driving directions, to a kind of full funnel marketing platform, a full funnel tool for both consumers and business owners. Most people don't think of it this way, but if you think about the funnel, and this is just one of many iterations, you've got awareness, consideration, research, and purchase behavior. Google Maps provides for every stage. They have the Explore button in Maps. There are other ways in which you get discovery content on Maps. It's really quite astounding, actually, now how much is there. Most people use Google Maps for directions or basic lookups, but there's many layers of depth. So you can do discovery there at the top of the funnel. There's ways to compare businesses, obviously, and then increasingly, Google is allowing you to take action in one form or another. Message businesses, book restaurants, book appointments, request for quotes. There's a lot of different ways in which you can take action, reserve with Google and other methods to connect your intent, your search intent, and translate that into a conversion, essentially, or a proxy for conversion. This is one of the big stories of Google Maps. It has moved from just a search-like vehicle to hand you off to a website or to hand you off to a business where you then independently transact with them or not, to something which facilitates that transaction, which is a key development. And on the flip side, it aspires to be a kind of self-contained marketing program that can address each of these funnel stages, provide you with analytics that show you who's taking what kinds of actions and what's happening. It's imperfect in this regard, but this is its aspiration. And there are many SEOs who would tell you that if you have to pay attention to one platform as a business that does most of its transactions in the physical world, this is the one to pay attention to. And increasingly, Google, as I suggested, through Maps, is facilitating e-commerce. I don't talk about that here in this presentation, but there's a lot of e-commerce being driven now off of local listings and to some degree Google Posts. But it's going both ways. It's going online to offline and to some degree offline to online in the sense that it's generating e-commerce. Google, one of the key features of or functions of Google My Business for the company is as a kind of gateway drug to ads. So Google has gone all in trying to get businesses, local businesses, small businesses in particular, because enterprises that have many locations work with agencies and they already get all this stuff. But trying to get small businesses to come in, claim their profiles, verify their profiles, populate them, and then once they've established a relationship and can sort of educate these businesses, then they try and make their different kinds of ads, local service ads, local ads, smart campaigns, and so on, call-only campaigns, make these available to local businesses and promote them. So it is a tool that helps move the business owner up the funnel or down the funnel, so to speak, for Google itself. So now let's talk a little bit about the future. First, let's admire this lovely photograph here. Let's just take a moment. Serenity, opportunity, the promise of the potential. All right. In April of last year, Google did something very interesting that a lot of people were aware of. They released a survey mostly intended for small businesses, but small agencies also got this. And those are the people that exposed this online. And it was a pretty extensive survey. And it asked about a lot of features and services and functionality, what the level of interest was. It also asked about prioritization, and it bundled them. It said, would you pay, and it asked about pricing. So it presented these hypotheticals. Would you pay a monthly subscription fee of $50 or $25 or $60 for these various tools? And people saw it, and it was very interesting as a kind of window into Google's thinking about product roadmap. But people saw it and were kind of freaked out about the prospect that Google might claw back some of Google My Business's free functionality and monetize that with fees. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think we will see subscription-based, SaaS-based products from Google going forward, but I don't think they're going to take existing functionality and try and exclude it from a free bundle. I could be wrong, but that's my sense. An example of what I'm talking about is CallJoy. CallJoy is a virtual agent that will answer the phone on behalf of a small business owner. It's got enormously sophisticated technology on the back end. It's built on the same infrastructure that powers Google Assistant and Google Duplex, but it's designed to be an answering service with a lot of analytics for small business owners. One of the problems that Google is trying to address is the fact that a lot of small business owners don't answer the phone. CallJoy costs $39 a month. It'll give you call transcripts. It'll give you a lot of analytics. It helps you understand your customers' behavior. I don't have any visibility because Google hasn't published it into the success of this, but it's being promoted in the GMB dashboard. So you can see it as you log in, and Google, it's a kind of a house ad for this product, which costs $39 a month. And I think this is the model that Google is going to use going forward. They will introduce some premium tools or services or features and ask people to pay for them on a monthly basis. Interestingly, one of those is remove ad from business profile. So Yelp does that. If you're a Yelp advertiser, you don't have any competitors' ads on your profile. If you're not an advertiser, there are the competitors' ads. Google right now has competitive ads on business profiles in various places. And they ask the question, would you be willing to pay to remove that? So that's just an interesting aside. I don't know if they'll do that. Right now, you can't pay to get rid of ads that appear on the profile. But I do definitely think we are going to see some set of premium services beyond CallJoy. And to some degree, it depends on the success of that as well. Another really interesting thing about how Google has evolved Maps and GMB functionality sort of in conjunction with one another is what we might call sort of under the umbrella conversational commerce. That's a term that's been thrown around a lot, refers to messaging, bots, messenger apps. But I would sort of expand it to include social features. So what I'm showing here is a range of things. We see the ability now to follow businesses, which Google introduced last year. So you can follow individual businesses, and that means that they can communicate with you through updates and posts and things like that. And you can follow local guides. And there's even a way in which Google could build out a kind of social network around local guides. It probably will not, but these are interesting features that allow you to follow people through Google Maps and get updates from businesses, get recommendations from local guides. And then in Maps, under the Updates button, you'll see some of that content in a personalized way. So there's a way in which these social features also personalize the Maps experience for you. The screenshot on the right is about messages. Google has implemented messages and kind of evolved that implementation, and in the opinion of many, has kind of screwed it up. It's a very, very important communication channel. It's also part of this whole larger construct of, connecting the dots between online and offline, facilitating transactions, and it's kind of these things together kind of play into a sort of an evolving CRM style set of tools, or CRM-like. You're never going to see Google do, well, I should never say never, but you're not likely to see Google do segmentation and allow you to message particular customers, but they are doing things which sort of have the hint of a CRM style system when sort of taken together. This is a very, very important concept I've talked about a number of times. So this notion of actions or task completion or transactions, this is a big, big push, and I've already spoken about it. But this is what the mission of the assistant is to some degree. It's to get things done. Sundar Pichai talked about in 2018 at Google I/O, getting things done using the Google Assistant. And this is a big emphasis. It's taking the search, the high level of intent, and bringing it along, compressing the funnel, and leading you to an action, a food delivery, reservation, appointment with the business, a message to the business across a range of interfaces and channels. Visual search, also very important. We'll see how much effort Google puts into this, but AR, walking directions, augmented reality walking directions, Google Lens, and search by photos. Lens allows you to take a picture, upload it, and shop it, basically do e-commerce off of a picture or objects in the real world. Lens can also translate menus. It can get information into the search engine visually using the camera. Search by photos uses computer vision and lots of machine learning to present you with options that formerly would have been just websites or business profiles, and you can then use the images to navigate to a business profile. this demands more attention to photos on Google My Business. But these are very exciting and interesting things that are also going on at Snapchat and Pinterest and different retailers using the camera, using imagery as a search tool and as a way to get more quickly to a transaction, to an e-commerce transaction. Voice is of critical importance as well. So we've heard a lot of hype about voice search, you know, the discredited stat that voice search was supposed to be 50% of all searches this year. That's another example of people just citing a stat that isn't grounded in reality or was misquoted originally. Forget about that. Voice is a really critical interface. So this is a kind of representation of all these smart devices that Google is coming out with, all these smart home devices, Nest devices, the Assistant, Android TV, and so on and so forth. And voice is the user interface for all of these. So Maps is the interface for the real world on your mobile device, and voice is the interface for everything else, including in-car experiences. And all of that is powered by the data that Google is ingesting directly from Google My Business and third-party sources and distributing across these different platforms. You know, this is the example of the Bill Gates. I think Bill Gates is the one that was talking about how we overestimate change in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. Voice is one of those examples. It is a radical, transformative technology that is built on enormous sophistication that Google, in Google's natural language processing, its BERT algorithm, neural matching, all these things that help it understand language. And it's just astonishing what is possible now, and we all take it for granted. So as I conclude here, I wanted to just sort of reiterate some of the themes that I talked about today. The big meta theme, especially coming out of coronavirus, or pretending like we're coming out of coronavirus because it's not really over, is the integration of the digital and physical worlds. Those were always treated as two separate channels, retailers who had separate P&Ls for online and stores. Well, now that doesn't work anymore. We're seeing much more of a connection. Buy online, pick up in store is an example of that, real-time inventory. Then Google inserting itself as a mediator of online to offline experiences, right in the center of that lookup and the transaction. As I mentioned, their objective is to create immediacy, to connect the dots between online and offline, the business owner and the consumer, to facilitate appointments, transactions, and task completion. And search itself, as I illustrated with visual search and voice, is moving from a query in a box, a sort of traditional set of a keyword string and a SERP, to a diversified set of outputs and inputs. And all of this is powered by enormously sophisticated machine learning and artificial intelligence, which is allowing these new experiences to happen, and they're becoming more personal and contextual. And finally, back to sort of the big picture, voice, visual, and Google Maps are the new search UIs for this new era of ambient and mobile computing. And now, before we conclude, I'd like to introduce a video from Katie Jordan talking about the Search Engine Land Awards.
Awesome keynote. I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as we did. We just have a quick announcement for you all that we wanted to share from our team here at Search Engine Land. These are unprecedented times. Don't worry, we're not going to do that to you. What we are going to do, though, is let you know that in just over a month, the 2020 Search Engine Land Awards are going to be wrapping up, and we'll start our judging period. So all that means is you have a full month to pick your best campaign and show us what you've got, and hopefully you'll be able to be honored as one of the best in search from the past year. So here's what you need to do. Very simple. Number one, check out our categories. We have 17 this year, ranging from paid to organic, mobile, local, agency of the year, search market of the year, a bunch of options, see which one fits best. Number two, pick your best campaign. You have it in mind? Good. Number three, gather your data. We want your data to tell us a story about the work you did, the research you did, your successes, even your failures. Let us know and submit that in your